You are not lazy. You are paralyzed, and there is a massive difference between the two. A truly lazy person sits on the couch and feels peace. You sit on the couch while your mind builds empires, rewrites your future, and berates you for not moving. Machiavelli understood this centuries ago. He called it the curse of the man who sees too clearly and acts too rarely. You are a burning engine with the brakes locked, and today we release them. Your so-called laziness is not a lack of drive. It is a direct symptom of an ambition so massive that your biological survival mechanism has pulled the emergency brake. Society looks at you and sees a slacker. Machiavelli would look at you and see a sleeping prince who has not yet understood his own power. The graveyard is full of people who had potential and never unlocked it, buried with their empires still inside them. Today we perform an autopsy on your inaction. Most people will tell you to just do it. Machiavelli would tell you to first understand the dark psychology of your own resistance. He wrote that men are driven more by fear than by ambition, and the man who understands his own fear becomes dangerous. We are going to dissect 11 layers of paralysis and replace each one with a precise Machiavellian strategy. By the end of this, you will not feel motivated. You will feel something colder and more permanent than motivation. The dream is the first prison, but the dopamine of planning is the second one, and it is harder to escape. Leonardo da Vinci, the greatest visionary in human history, was called lazy, unreliable, and difficult by the very patrons who commissioned him. He could see the perfection of his vision so clearly that the act of bringing it into flawed reality was physically painful. This is where you live, addicted to the potential of who you could be, choosing the safety of the dream over the brutality of the work. Machiavelli wrote that men are more moved by imagination than by reason. In your mind, you are a billionaire, a master craftsman, a conqueror. And in the safety of your imagination, you never fail, never stutter, never make a bad investment. The moment you start working, you introduce the possibility of failure, friction, and mediocrity. So you choose the hallucination of greatness over the reality of imperfect progress. Researchers call this motivational ambivalence. The world does not pay you for what you could do. It pays you for what you have done. Your laziness is a shield protecting the fragile potential living in your basement. But this shield is crushing your spine and suffocating the very thing it claims to protect. Machiavelli wrote that fortune favors the bold. Not the brilliant, not the talented, not the visionary, but the bold. The graveyard is full of people who had potential and chose the dream over the work. Stop protecting your potential and start spending it. Because potential held indefinitely becomes regret, and regret is the heaviest thing a man carries to his grave. You are trading a life of reality for a hallucination of greatness, and the trade gets worse with every passing year. Machiavelli would tell you that a prince who only plans and never acts is not a prince. He is a prisoner of his own imagination wearing a crown made of nothing. Planning is the second prison, but the freeze response of the gifted is the one that locks the cell from the inside. You buy the journals, download the apps, create the color-coded schedule, and research the perfect system for 6 hours. And when you finish planning, you feel accomplished, satisfied like you have done the work. This is a biological trap. Your brain releases dopamine for vivid visualization of success nearly as powerfully as it does for actual achievement. You are getting high on your own future before you have paid a single price for it. You fall in love with the blueprint and lose all interest in the construction. Because drawing the castle is exciting while laying the bricks is loud, tedious, and covered in dust. You have 5 half-started businesses, 3 half-written manuscripts, and a dozen saved scrolls on how to improve your craft. You consume instruction like it is sustenance, feeling productive while remaining completely stationary. Real ambition is not a montage set to triumphant music. Real ambition is sitting in a quiet room doing a task you hate for the 1,000th time because it is necessary. The amateur waits for the perfect tool before he begins. The professional starts with whatever is at hand and improves the tools while the work is already in motion. Machiavelli observed that the prince who waits for perfect conditions will wait forever. Fortune does not hold still while you prepare. Stop researching the best way to begin and start bumping into the trees in the dark. Because bruises are data and planning is just theory dressed in comfortable clothes. If you find yourself preparing for more than 30 minutes, you are not preparing. You are hiding from the moment of commitment. Machiavelli wrote that the man who hesitates gives his enemy time to prepare and his allies time to find someone stronger. Your hesitation is your enemy's greatest gift. The freeze keeps you small, but the paradox of energy is what drains you without you ever moving an inch. Many of you were gifted children. You were told you were brilliant, success came easily, and you never learned the muscle of struggle. Then you grew up, the problems became harder, the competition fiercer, and suddenly raw talent was not enough. You actually had to try, but trying meant admitting you were no longer the natural. So you froze. And the freeze is not laziness, it is a trauma response, your nervous system perceiving difficulty as a threat to your entire identity. You look at people you know are less intelligent and less talented than you and watch them succeed. It makes you sick. It makes you bitter. You tell yourself you could do it better. But they are not afraid to look stupid, not afraid to be clumsy, not burdened by the weight of being special. They are free to fail, and because they are free to fail, they eventually become exceptional. You are trapped in the prison of your own high standards, and your standards are the lock on your cell door. You must kill the gifted child inside you. He is a ghost haunting your present with the achievements of your past, demanding perfection before permission to begin. The moment you admit you are not special, you become dangerous, because you stop protecting an image and start doing the actual work that builds real power. Machiavelli wrote that the prince who fears losing his reputation more than losing ground will lose both simultaneously. Give yourself permission to produce garbage. The first draft of everything is garbage. The first business is clumsy. The first attempt is embarrassing. If you cannot tolerate the garbage, you will never reach the gold that lies underneath it. And everyone who has ever built anything real spent considerable time knee-deep in their own necessary garbage first. Lower the bar for the start, not for the outcome. You can raise it once the engine is running. Energy follows action, but your laziness weaponized correctly becomes your greatest strategic advantage. You tell yourself at the end of the day that you are too tired to work on your ambition, but you are not tired because you did too much. You are tired because you did too little of what actually matters. Suppressed ambition is physically exhausting. Holding back a flood requires more energy than releasing it. Every idea you ignore and every session you avoid costs your body real metabolic energy in guilt and repression. You are drained by the war in your own head, not by the work you never started. If you actually started the project, wrote 500 words, did 20 minutes of physical work, you would discover you suddenly have more energy, not less, because action creates energy while stagnation breeds fatigue. This is Newton's first law applied to the human mind. An object at rest stays at rest, and an object in motion stays in motion. The hardest part is the friction of the first 10 minutes. High performers never feel like it. The athlete does not feel like waking before dawn. The general does not feel like having the brutal necessary conversation, but they have permanently decoupled their action from their feeling. You are a slave to your mood. You treat your internal weather like a god and wait for sunshine before you will work. Machiavelli wrote that the man who waits for perfect conditions to act will die waiting. Fortune rewards those who move in the rain. Stop checking your internal weather report to see if conditions are right to begin. It does not matter if it is raining in your head, you work in the rain. The mood follows the action. The action does not follow the mood, and waiting for inspiration is waiting for lightning to strike a man hiding in a basement. Get on the roof. Stand in the storm. Do the work while uninspired and discover that inspiration arrives only after the work has already begun. Weaponized laziness builds systems, but the shadow of the parent is what keeps you from claiming those systems as your own. There is a profound difference between passive laziness, stagnation, and strategic laziness, which is simply the ruthless pursuit of maximum efficiency. The ambitious, lazy person hates wasted effort above everything. Their brain intuitively rejects bloated, unnecessary tasks and searches for the elegant solution. Machiavelli wrote that the wise prince does not fight with his own arms when the arms of others will accomplish the same objective at lower cost. This hatred of inefficiency is not a weakness. Use your laziness to build systems. If you hate answering correspondence, build templates and hire an assistant rather than simply ignoring the letters. The laziest, ambitious person is the one who invents the wheel because dragging rocks is genuinely intolerable to them. But you have to actually invent the wheel, not simply sit on the rock and complain about its weight. Ask yourself honestly whether you are avoiding the work because you are scared or because you genuinely know there is a better way. The lazy, ambitious person who never learns to distinguish fear from efficiency will use the language of strategy to justify complete inaction, calling avoidance optimization and calling fear wisdom. Be ruthless with your own honesty. The maximum return for minimum investment is the definition of a good investor, and applying that principle to your life requires actually making the investment. Machiavelli wrote that a prince who mistakes cowardice for caution has already begun his own defeat. You are the most dangerous person in any room when your laziness is properly directed, because you will find the elegant solution that the grinding, industrious person never stops long enough to see. But the elegance must produce actual output. Efficiency without result is just comfort with better excuses. Harness the hatred of waste, build the system, and then run it without mercy. Free the rebel, but the Trojan horse is how you actually sneak your ambition past the last line of defense. Many lazily ambitious people are unconsciously rebelling against an authority figure from their past. A demanding parent whose voice they have now internalized as a tyrant living inside their own head. As a child, passivity was your only available rebellion. They could make you sit there, but they could not make you work. Now you are an adult. The authority figure is gone from the room, but has moved permanently inside your skull, and you are still refusing to work to prove to yourself that you are free. You are locked in a power struggle with yourself, procrastinating to prove to yourself that you are free. But this is a false freedom that destroys your own financial future just to give the middle finger to a voice that exists only in your own mind. You are both the prisoner and the warden simultaneously, and the cell you are locked in was built entirely by you. Machiavelli wrote that the prince who cannot govern himself cannot govern anything. Internal sovereignty must come before external power. The person who never identifies the internal tyrant will spend their entire adult life sabotaging their own goals as an act of unconscious rebellion against an authority that left the room decades ago. They will destroy their financial future, their health, and their legacy just to maintain the sensation of freedom, not realizing that the rebellion itself is the most sophisticated prison their mind has ever constructed. Machiavelli knew that the most dangerous enemies are always the ones inside the gates. Change the language from "I have to," which implies slavery and triggers the rebel, to "I choose to," which reclaims your agency and removes the ammunition from the internal tyrant. When you realize that your ambition is yours alone, not your parents', not society's, but entirely yours, the resistance begins to fade because there is no longer anyone to rebel against. You are not doing this for them. You are doing this for the version of yourself that is screaming to be released. The Trojan horse gets you started, and the 2-minute lie keeps you going long after the guards wake up. Your brain is a fortress designed to keep you safe from the danger of work. The moment you approach its gates with a massive goal, the archers on the wall fire, and you are shut down before you begin. You cannot storm the gate, and you cannot reason with the guards. You must use a Trojan horse. Machiavelli wrote that the wise prince does not announce his intentions to those who would prevent them. He conceals his real objective inside something harmless until he is already inside the walls. If you want a run, do not tell your brain you are going for a run. That is a declaration of war the defenses will crush. Tell yourself you are just putting on your shoes. Your brain agrees shoes are harmless. Once the shoes are on, you are just stepping outside, then just walking to the corner, and by the time you reach the corner, you are already in motion and the friction is gone. You did not storm the gate. You walked through it disguised as something small and unthreatening. Most ambitious people have an ego that demands grandeur. If they cannot do the full 2-hour session, it is not worth doing anything at all, and that arrogance is precisely what keeps them permanently stationary. The micro-betrayal requires humility. You must admit that you are currently too weak to face the big goal directly, so you sneak up on it from the side. Machiavelli wrote that the prince who insists on attacking the strongest point of a fortress will exhaust his army. An avalanche begins with a single snowflake. A forest fire starts with a single spark, and your empire starts with one sock picked up from the floor. Do not underestimate the power of the start, no matter how ridiculously small it feels, because the ridiculousness is the point. Your ego is not threatened by something small, and when your ego is not threatened, you will actually do it. The micro-betrayal is Machiavellian strategy applied to your own mind. The 2-minute lie overcomes friction, but tomorrow is the most dangerous drug you have ever taken. Pushing a car from a dead stop is brutal. Keeping a rolling car in motion is effortless, and you are permanently stuck in static friction. Tell yourself you will do the task for exactly 2 minutes, and if you hate it after 2 minutes, you have full permission to stop. This is a lie, but it is a strategically useful one. You are giving your brain an escape hatch so the panic subsides, and you are not committing to a prison sentence, just a commercial break. Once you start, a strange phenomenon occurs. The Zeigarnik effect, the psychological principle that the human brain hates unfinished tasks and creates cognitive tension until they are closed. You open the loop and your brain immediately wants to close it. Stopping after 2 minutes becomes harder than continuing because your mind is now invested in the completion. You have tricked your biology into working for you instead of against you, and you did it with nothing more than a harmless 2-minute promise. You cannot think your way into flow. You can only act your way into it because flow is a biological reward for overcoming friction that cannot be accessed any other way. The people who wait to feel inspired are waiting for lightning to strike a man hiding in a basement. Lightning only hits the people standing on the roof screaming at the sky. Machiavelli wrote that fortune is a woman. She yields to those who press her boldly, not to those who wait for her invitation. Stop waiting for the water to get warm before you jump in. The shock of the cold lasts a second and the swim lasts a lifetime. Trust the 2-minute deal completely. If you actually hate it after 2 minutes, stop, because if you break the deal, your brain will never believe the promise again. But 95% of the time, you will look up and discover 20 minutes have passed and you are already in the work. Kill tomorrow. But dopamine starvation is how you make the present moment impossible to ignore. Tomorrow is the most dangerous drug in human existence. When you say, "I will do it tomorrow," your brain releases a hit of relief. The anxiety vanishes, and you feel responsible and organized without having solved anything. You did not fix the problem. You displaced the pain and outsourced the suffering to your future self. Machiavelli wrote that men deceive themselves most completely when they believe that delaying a decision is itself a decision. You will never live in tomorrow. When it arrives, it will be today, and today you will still be tired, still be scared, and still be the same person you are right now unless you interrupt the pattern in this moment. Brain scans show that when we think about our future self, the same regions activate as when we think about a stranger. You do not care about future you. You would happily throw future you under the carriage to make present you comfortable. Translate every "I will do it later" immediately into "I am never going to do it," and feel the full weight of that truth rather than the comfortable numbness of the delay. If the word "never" does not frighten, you then delete the goal and admit honestly that you do not want it. But if "never" terrifies you, then now is your only real option, because tomorrow has never once in the history of human achievement delivered what today refused. Treat tomorrow like a toxic friend who is actively trying to sabotage you, because that is precisely what it is. Do the work now while you are tired, while you are busy, while you are uninspired, because those conditions will never disappear, and waiting for them to improve is waiting for a storm that never ends. Machiavelli wrote that the man who acts decisively in imperfect conditions will always outperform the man who acts perfectly in conditions that never arrive. Starve the distraction, and kill the perfectionism that has been protecting your masterpiece from ever existing. Your laziness is often not laziness at all. It is overstimulation, your brain so flooded with cheap dopamine from endless entertainment that it has completely lost the ability to pursue the slow dopamine of meaningful work. Compared to a 15-second viral entertainment, writing a manuscript feels like torture. Of course, you cannot focus. You are a diabetic in a candy store trying to eat broccoli. You do not need more motivation. You need starvation. When you need to work, remove everything. The music, the food, the noise, the entertainment, and make the work the most exciting thing in the room by making the room unbearably boring. If you lock yourself in an empty room with nothing but a pen and blank parchment, you will eventually write. Not because you are inspired, but because writing becomes more interesting than staring at a stone wall. This is dopamine fasting applied to ambition. The ambitious person who never controls their dopamine environment will find themselves endlessly consuming instruction, strategy, and motivation content while producing nothing. Feeling busy, feeling educated, feeling like they are moving while remaining completely stationary. Your ambition is the hunger. The entertainment is the junk food that keeps you full enough to never actually hunt. Stop snacking, and the hunger that was always there will return with a force that surprises you. Create a low dopamine zone for your work. Make the work the most interesting thing available by removing everything more interesting around it. You are not lazy and you are not unmotivated. You are simply overentertained, and the cure is environmental design, not willpower. Machiavelli wrote that the wise general does not fight the enemy's strength. He removes the enemy's supply lines, and your cheap entertainment is the supply line keeping your resistance alive. Make the ugly pot, and then make another one, because the empire was always built one imperfect brick at a time. Perfectionism is not high standards. It is the mother of procrastination wearing high standards as a mask. You are waiting to do it right, and because you do not yet know how to do it right, you do nothing, protecting your masterpiece from the reality of your current incompetence. Give yourself explicit permission to produce absolute garbage. If the goal is trash, you cannot fail, and the liberation of that permission is what finally allows the work to begin. Machiavelli never waited to be wise before acting. A pottery class was divided into two groups. One graded on quantity of pots produced, the other graded on producing one perfect pot. At semester's end, the most beautiful, technically perfect pots all came from the quantity group. Because while the quality group theorized about perfection, the quantity group was throwing clay every day, learning from every mistake, and iterating toward mastery without realizing it. Quantity leads to quality. You cannot edit a blank page. You cannot optimize a business that does not yet exist. You cannot improve a first draft that was never written. The perfectionist who never begins leaves no legacy, no product, no record, and no evidence that their brilliance was ever real. Only the testimony of people who knew them and say they could have been great. Machiavelli wrote that the man who waits to be perfect before he leads will be led by imperfect men who began without waiting. Be prolific, not perfect. Perfection is a luxury reserved for the person who has already done the foundational work, and you have not yet earned the right to be a perfectionist. You are a bricklayer right now. Lay the bricks without commentary and paint the wall later. Machiavelli wrote that the prince who refuses to build his fortress until he can build it perfectly will be conquered before the first stone is laid. Build it badly and improve it while your enemies are still laughing at the rough walls. Machiavelli wrote that the prince who understands the nature of his own resistance becomes unconquerable, not because he eliminates the resistance, but because he knows exactly how to root around it. You have now seen 11 layers of paralysis and 11 precise strategies to dismantle each one. Think about which of these 11 phases describes your current situation most accurately, and drop your honest answer in the comments.